sitting there with my mic off. Good morning. Sorry for the slightly late start. I was just finding some files that weren't where I left them. Thanks for dropping in today. I have two games from the community, which are both in a sort of pixel art JRPG kind of vein, but they are both slightly different types of games. And we have Godless Avalon, which has been sent in by one of our channel patrons. Godless Avalon, which is, I'm just seeing if we've got any notes on this. Streaming, truly the career for someone who cannot multitask. So this is coming from Jolnir, who is one of our patrons. Thanks for sending this in. This is a demo and an open beta. It's a demo for the systems, visuals, world, tone. I'm confident with it as a true vertical slice that represents the final game. It's about 20 minutes long, showcasing the core loop and systems with a dungeon, combat, and a few character scenes. Excellent. That's kind of what we want to see. The part that's open beta, and specifically why I'm desperate to see players play, is to gauge the baseline difficulty for the overall combat and progression or balance. The classic trap is I'm too familiar with the game and I can't judge its difficulty on my own. Yeah, that's what we call designeritis. When you make your game too hard because you've been playing it for too long. So we're going to be checking out Godless Avalon first, and then the other one, Echo of God. You can tell that they're JRPGs because they both have incomprehensible titles with God in them. The second game, Echo of God, was described as a JRPG pretending to be a Metroidvania. So we're going to get all the kind of dialogue and world building that you'd expect from a JRPG, but maybe a little bit more Metroidvania-ish. Although I think all of the features that would be in this that make it RPG-ish are probably in Hollow Knight as well. So this is coming in from the developer. Zach says they're using Godot, making the art, coding, music, story, everything. I make music professionally first and foremost, so this is basically their first serious attempt at making a game. And this is maybe 30 minutes as well. Okay, so we only have an hour's worth of game according to the developers, but I'm sure I will rant and ramble over them, and it will take longer than it should, because that's what we're here for. As always, please give feedback to the devs in the chat. It's really, really helpful, and I think doing so kind of helps you to hone your own design senses as well. A lot of design comes down to having some sort of personal taste and being able to articulate it and work out why certain games work for you and certain games don't. And I think that's particularly important in the indie space. I think if you're a commercial game designer, like I was, you have to understand how to empathize with different sorts of players and make things for them. And that's still important as an indie, but as an indie, you're also in a position to mostly make what you like. And as long as you do a good job of that and you're honest about the quality of what you're doing, someone out there is going to have the same taste as you. So I think using these kind of streams and the chat as a way of kind of just practicing, like articulating what you like and don't like about things and trying to rationalize your own taste, I suppose, is kind of, to me, that's a big part of design. It's almost more important than all of the kind of psychology theory and stuff that we talk about sometimes. Okay, Godless Avalon is a work in progress. This demo features scenes and areas planned for the second episode. Therefore, the canonicity of the following story events is uncertain. Have fun. Okay, and we're jumping deep into the game, which I think is a good idea for when you are testing stuff. Especially when you're testing for appeal. Like, when you're just showing someone a game and going, do you generally like this? You don't necessarily need to be making them play a tutorial for half an hour to do that. Let's do the story so far. Recap. When I was a kid, a space alien crash-landed near Rome. He fought as a gladiator and became a beloved champion. Okay, this has already got me interested thematically. Then he made his pitch to the Senate and people. Bring me this planet's ichor source. What a great alien. He's got like a big moustache, like a sort of 70s rock dude. He looks like Lemmy from Motorhead, but also a wrestler. I'll teach you the secrets of the Space Lords. I mean, maybe it's supposed to look like Macho Man Randy Savage. Ultimate magic power will be in your hands. Rome wanted what he promised, and he granted the champion his freedom and a governorship and the rank of praetor. This is like idiocracy, but in ancient Rome, and with it legions. Zaug had command of Rome's might. See, this is already grabbing me because it's unusual to see a JRPG that is set in the real world, and the art, all of the art style of this feels very sort of authentically, you know, early to mid 90s Nintendo pixel art. But we're already doing that strange thing that they did with like Earthbound or Mother, where we're not in a sort of totally kind of science fantasy universe. We're in a dimension next door to our own one. And to me, like that, I find that immediately a little bit more interesting. I'm just trying to turn the brightness down on my camera, sorry. Unproblematic alien Hulk Hogan. Then we learned about his secret plan. That seems to have done it. There we go. And when we tried to expose it, we only forced his hand. It was a race to the ichor source. The signal's strong. The island's about to come into view. About time! These guys have real, I don't know if you remember the old Ninja Turtles cartoon. There were like these kids from the future in a flying car. These guys have got the same vibe. We're being jammed. Who's got a fleet? Not just us. All the airwaves are scrambled. This skiff can't keep up. Here they come. Zaug cast the World Breaker spell. He raised Goblin Island into the sky. Maybe it's not in real Rome. Maybe there's just a place called Rome. Then he shot down our airship. It's giving sort of Chrono Trigger. One of the Shining games, Shining in the Darkness or Shining the Holy Ark, or one of those had this kind of top-down Chrono Trigger type thing as well. So I'm just naming old games, but what I'm really trying to get to is this feels really authentic, and I think when you are playing in this area of very nostalgic pixel art and genre stuff, it's important to get that stuff right, and it does feel good. You've got some sort of modern things, like you can see the little squash and stretch on the plants as we run through them, which is like a modern thing, but it's not fighting the pixel art too much. It's, yeah, it feels great. So I'm just, who's that? Tom Parr. Tom, your name is in the unreadable blue color today. Press the attack button. Okay, Shetty Punch, that's our... We've got like a big swoosh. We don't actually have an attack animation for the guy. I think you could just have one frame of them with their thing out, but I guess maybe that's trying to make up for the fact that there's going to be loads of different stuff and they don't want to have loads of animations for it. Can't get through there. Kill that eyeball. Oh, okay. And it becomes a... That's interesting. So we've got this little smash we can do on the main map to break through things, but then when we go into a combat, it goes into a mini-game. And that means we don't have to use the world space to do the fights, which could have some pros and cons to it. check your items and more with the menu. Okay. Got an old revolver. It's his primary weapon. Hold attack to charge. Cowboy hat, maximum HP. Okay. Pogs. Amazing. That's a good bit of creative direction as well, in the sense that if you're drawing on this 90s nostalgia thing, then Pogs is a thing that I've never seen as a collectible in a game, but these JRPGs, and particularly sort of like the Final Fantasies, when you get up to like 8 and 9, they started to have these card games built in, like the early predecessors of Gwent, and doing that as Pogs is very funny, because that's like a mid-90s thing that, as far as I'm aware, would never have been in a JRPG of the time, but it's nostalgic for the same period. And that means that even someone playing this who's like 20 now, who is maybe nostalgic for the 90s and 90s games, will go, oh, what's Pogs? And then look it up, and then they'll kind of have that, what's the word? There's a name for it when you have nostalgia for a thing that you weren't actually alive for. There's a specific name for it. Pick a fight with Sucker Punch. Okay, so yeah, we run around in this little arena, we fight the stuff, so it kind of is doing a downwell where we have encounters that take us off into a separate game. I think the downside of that is we don't get to use the space of this to move around in, and in a regular game where you're finding encounters on the map and fighting them on the map, the space then becomes important to how you position, and can you be up on top of something or can you hide behind something. But I guess the fighting mechanics don't work with that anyway, because we're mostly just dodging and slashing. So it could be a missed opportunity, but it really depends. Okay, hold the shoulder trigger to aim your gun, and then we can... So we can attack enemies that are... Oh, I see. Okay, so I see how this works now. So those enemies, those combats, aren't really there to provide much of a real challenge at this stage. They are there to gate our physical progress through the world. Yeah. Anemoia. That's it. Moya, that is. Yeah, Anemoia is when you have this kind of sense of nostalgia for something you didn't actually personally experience. And I think putting Pogs in a JRPG like this is a great idea. But yeah, so we've had a couple of combats, and you'll have noticed that shooting the eyeballs brings down those tentacles that are blocking the terrain, and then we can get through, that's really cool. It means that the different bits of the game are very tightly bound together, right? Because you can have the classic JRPG scenario where you're walking around a dungeon, you have random encounters, and then you get items and experience and so on. But the encounters don't have anything to do, apart from like the monsters being chosen based on where you are and which dungeon you're in. They don't really have anything to do with the dungeon. So having a system where you need to do this tiny little combat mini game in order to move these barriers and get through, that feels like a really nice meshing together of the different parts of the game, even though those parts are quite simple. Yeah, I'm liking what I see here so far, and like I've said on this channel lots of times, I'm always a little bit immediately apprehensive with RPGs in this kind of vein. I've been a long time RPG Maker user, and I just dislike that basic battle system of like turn-based combat in JRPGs, because if you go back to things like the early Final Fantasies and Pokemons, it is very much a style of game where you're supposed to be rewarded for grinding and leveling something up, because the actions you take in the combat aren't usually that interesting or tactical. They are much more about like, do I spend my mana resources quickly and nuke this thing, or do I just risk hitting it every turn with a sword? And to me, that's not super interesting in today's kind of gaming milieu, when you've got things like Darkest Dungeon and everything. But what I've seen here, where it's like the combat is a very little Undertale type mini game, and it's directly linked to progressing in the unlocking the world, that's neat. That's really elegant, and I like what's happening there. we'll see how the combat evolves as we work our way through the rest of the demo.
Yo! Mr. Ingram, we made it! Told you we would. Zaug's on this island too. The source is close.
Yeah, so Dev, if you're watching this, chat basically noting about the fire feeling a little bit misleading. Like, there are players who wouldn't have tried to just walk immediately through that fire because they would have thought it wasn't passable or it was going to hurt them. I would put it around the edge and make sure there's a clear path through, otherwise some people just won't even try and walk through it.
Let's get to work.
Okay, so I've got her now. She's got a wind spell. And they've both got a hold attack to charge, so swap your party leader. Okay, we can swap them around. Check out in here. Oh, and we've got a twin stick shooter thing in combat if we use the other joystick. Ouch, spikes hurt. Okay, so I think what that's telling me is I need to shoot these guys to start combat rather than going straight up to them. So we've got mini twin stick shooter combat where they've both got a different gun and we can switch between them. Yeah, this is doing a very good job of like proving itself very quickly. The twin stick shooter combat that you get there as well, it does what Binding of Isaac does, where you can only shoot in 4 directions, which might be initially frustrating for people, but it makes the moving around and the positioning more interesting. So these slightly brighter crystals with the purple bits on are the ones you can smash.
Not so fast, Mr. Ingram. Smell the bleed in the air.
Any magic in these crystals is gone. What's left isn't just worthless, it's unstable. Tell that to them. Careful. Watch where they're looking. If the soldiers see us, they'll get their first shot. Okay, we're going to get stealth section now. Okay. Is the stream description not right? It's called Godless Avalon. Sorry, my let me just go and check. Has it not gone into the correct stream? Yeah, it's... Ah, you need the link. Let me see if I can change that while we're already live. I use Streamlabs rather than OBS because it is easier to do multi-streaming on, but it frequently messes up all of the descriptions and everything. Yeah, the attacks having those kind of 4-directional attacks is it does make the movement and the positioning more interesting. Right, before we go too far in that direction, I just want to check I didn't miss anything out here. I had a feeling there was... Yeah, there is a thing down here that I missed. Radio's in okay shape. Maybe there's a little fanfare when you pick up objects. I would think about maybe maybe dipping the main music when you play that fanfare, because it was just playing over it at the same volume. Tonight's top headlines. Champion Gladiator's streak cut short at 99. Union riots continue at Ick Refinery. God's blood belongs to everyone. Breaking news just in. Caesar murdered. Ick bigwig on the run. Praetorian Guard assures our listeners the people are in safe hands. Okay. That's us, basically. I think, you know, we're kind of public enemy number one now. We got a POG. We got a new POG. We got the iCore engine. I think maybe let's placeholder up because we don't have all the POGs yet. One thing I would do a very small check on is the copyright status of POGs. There's a distortion in the gravity. Union HQ, Crystal Yard. Okay. So you're sort of waiting for the bead to draw on you with the target, and then when it fires, that's when you need to dodge, because it's going to shoot for where you were previously. And if they see you in that stealth section, they get to hurt you before the combat starts, I think. One thing I would say about the balancing of this, because it was something the dev asked about. Oh, I just died. I think the melee strike should do more damage than the gun or the spells in combat, because there's a trade-off in getting close to them, right? But there's not a trade-off because both the things seem to do the same amount of damage. So let's just check that out. If I do, yeah, that's how much damage happens when I just melee them up one. It does 1. Yeah, so my gun does way more damage, but my gun is safer to use because I don't need to go near them. Right? So I think it might be better for the gun to be weaker than the melee. Like if I go in close, because if you think about it in terms of trade-offs, right? I'm running around trying to dodge the projectiles that come in from the outside, which means I need to constantly keep moving. And as long as I'm free to move where I want to move, I can usually get some shots in and hit them with the gun, and the gun's doing 3 damage. The melee attack is only doing 1 damage. And in order to make a melee strike, I have to be in a very specific place. I have to be very close to them. So it would make more sense for like the gun to be doing 2 and the melee to be doing 3, because otherwise there's no real reason to go in close and do a melee. And I'm not saying that they should be equal. What we want to create is a situation where the decision to fight from a distance or to fight up close is a series of trade-offs which are interesting to think about and to weigh up in the moment. And if the melee does more damage, then trying to do melee attacks puts you in a more dangerous position of needing to be in a very specific place to pull the attack off, which then makes you more vulnerable to the projectiles coming in, because the projectiles are easy to dodge as long as you can move where you want, and as soon as you start needing to be in a very specific place, then the dodging becomes more difficult. So I'd think about that a little bit. Because all the time that does 3 and the other one... So she does 4 damage with that. Neither of them do much with their... The stealth works as well, because like the punishment for not passing the stealth check is you just have to fight 2 guys instead of 1, and that's still doable, so it's not like you totally fail the whole thing by missing a stealth check or whatever. but it does, you know, encourage you to try and do it properly. Okay, we need a tool to break that open, which we don't have yet. Lots of dudes in here. Are you with the soldiers? Oh no, these are good guys. These are the Union. What a day, bud. Cave-in just this morning. Tore my locker room in half. Not to mention the whole mine. Anyways, I'm not much of a talker. I heard a rumor that Zaug's leading the soldiers. If he is, do you think he'd sign some autographs? The army better leave before we run out of coffee. Sit and chat. Let's chat about that airship crash. You feeling okay? That airship crash was rough. The concern's appreciated, Mr. Ingram. I've survived worse. The bad part is we lost the boat. It wasn't easy to steal it. Tell me about... Back home from the lighthouse, you could see this island. Huck said it looked like a pimple on the horizon. Wonder what the view is now. Us up in the sky like this. It's illegal for us to be here, you know. Darn tootin' it is. Bite me, Johnny Law. The Empire put a lot of effort into telling people to keep out. Ick Corp is only allowed here to work their mine contract. I bet they're studying that fairy magic. The Skellies say Gob Island's haunted, but they say everything's haunted. Secret government experiments. Secrets from me too, if so. Maybe this pimple's just a special place. Yeah, Pepper, I think you're right. The way that these conversations are sort of optional and you can have them in a particular place, it's a good shout. It means you don't get interrupted with loads of it when you're not feeling in the mood for it. There's a distortion in the gravity. Okay, we found a few places where there's a distortion in the gravity. Don't know what it does. There's our tool for breaking open that bit. Okay, there's some there's some good I'm sorry, I'm skimming this a little bit. There's some good characterization here where basically there's something political in the world and each of our main characters has a different stance on it. So Owl is a lot more of a kind of I guess in line with the kind of bureaucratic empire and stuff, and Blitz is the rebel. And that means that they're obviously on the same side in this scenario that we're in. They're on the same side, they're on the same team. And the dialogue that they're having is often about this tension that they have in terms of how they interpret what's in the world. And I talked about this a lot actually. Last year we did a couple of workshops about writing dialogue for games and writing dialogue for story-heavy games. And what you've done here is exactly what I recommended people to do, which is, you know, if you've got a big thing happening in the world of your game, which you're probably going to have if it's any kind of science fiction or fantasy themed action or strategy game, there's going to be, you know, a big bad or something happening in the world. And a very easy way to exposit that in a way that's interesting and leave some kind of interpretatory space for the player is to make the characters have different stakes in it and different perspectives on it, right? So if we have a big situation in the world, and like you could pick a really cheesy obvious AAA one like Skyrim, we've got the Stormcloaks and the Empire, right? And then we have some characters that are presented as our friends that give us quests and stuff, but then they have some internal conflicts about which side is better and which side is in the right. that conflict between those characters is a way of giving the player context about those characters and their values and what they care about, and telling the player about the world in a way that doesn't feel like a big lore dump, because we're getting it viewed and filtered through the perspectives of individuals, right? Yeah, every character should have a different opinion of the theme of the story. Yeah, that's exactly it. And it doesn't have to be that way, because some people's personality is apathy, right? Some people are apolitical, some people just want to keep their head down and not get involved. But that's not necessarily a exciting thing to make one of your main characters. Okay, we've got the pickaxe. We can go back and clear that route. We've also got up here. We haven't looked up here. Is this going to shortcut us through a different place? Oh, I see. There's another pickaxe up there. I think maybe we only get one use of each pickaxe. So we've used that one. And then there's another one just up here. Just up there, and when we shoot this guy and do this combat, we'll be able to go and get that then. Oh! I honestly think, like, I didn't get on very well with not Downwell, with Undertale. I didn't play it for very long because I didn't like that bullet hell thing. But I do think this is a good format for this sort of game. Like, if you're going to have a big story-rich world and then have these little combats in it, I think the closer you go towards it being like this over-the-top simulation in the kind of Final Fantasy 6, 7, 8 kind of mode, it just tends to drag and just ends up feeling like it's about the grind. Whereas having like a little mini-game for the combat, just allows you to put more of your kind of care and attention and time into this side of things, which I think is the main draw. Watch out for danger. Use the right stick to peek around. Okay. Right, we're just going to try and sneak up on him. And again, we do have this kind of stealth minigame, so if we can trigger one of them without the others, we get to fight them on their own, and they don't get their free shot in on us and start us with less health. My heart sunk when I saw a stealth minigame, and then I realized it's actually very well implemented in terms of how all of these things fit together. Use flicks in combat. Hold attack to charge equip magic. Oh yeah, I sort of already knew we could do that, but I forgot about it. I'm going to wait for him to turn around and then hop. Okay. Hotwell said, why do you think people complain about JRPG combat but like Darkest Dungeon? I mean, I'm not saying that people generally complain about JRPG combat. I think that the Pokemon format is not tactically interesting enough for an adult brain, because the decisions that you make every turn aren't that interesting. The most interesting thing in Pokemon is the push your luck of, like, judging the situation and knowing how much damage they can deal and then working out when to withdraw your Pokemon. That's the juice in Pokemon. And then in a party-based one, like the kind of RPG Maker games produce, the engines produce, there's no spatial element, right? So you don't have the Fire Emblem Final Fantasy Tactics thing. And there's nothing to really change what you can do every turn. So you cycle through your characters, they have their moves that they can use, and then your core decision every turn is, do I spend resources, or do I do something cheap like just blocking or attacking with a weapon? Right? The reason, I mean, when you say why do people complain about JRPG combat but like Darkest Dungeon, my question to you is, have you played Darkest Dungeon? Because if you have, you will understand what features are in Darkest Dungeon which make it different. Right? It has that whole position system which is incredibly tactically rich. So there's a spatial element. It's not like a big grid. It's not an XCOM grid where you're moving around on a grid. It's a line. It's like a tug of war. 4 positions for your party, 4 positions for the enemy. And I bear in mind, they made 2 games. The second one, they changed it drastically from the first Darkest Dungeon. It's basically not really a pure sequel. It's a different... But the combat system is the same. Right? And it's not just that it's spatial. It's that... That spatial tug of war in Darkest Dungeon with the 4 and the 4 affects everything. You know, you've got certain moves you can only do from a particular position. Moves have a different effectiveness on different types of positions and can totally miss other types of position as well. And that is interesting, right? And then Slay the Spire solves the problem by, okay, we're taking turns dealing damage to a thing, but our options each turn are limited by what's in our hand. So there's lots of different ways of changing it. You know, the Slay the Spire approach, even if you take away the deck building and just make it a card game, there is an input randomness every turn, which means that every turn you've got a different decision space to think about when you plan your turn. Whereas in just a Final Fantasy VII or a RPG Maker game with all of the vanilla features, is every turn is roughly the same choice, and the only contextual thing that changes is like how much mana do I have, or do I have any potions left? And that's not as rich a decision space. This has taken us back to an earlier bit. No, we haven't been here yet. Okay. I think these have got resources in. But the reason I say all this, and the reason why that bothers me when people just kind of reproduce the Pokemon combat system, is I like this part of JRPGs. I like the wandering around a world. You know, this style of top-down dungeon where I can see all the places I could get to, but I don't know how to get to them yet. That's inherently quite intriguing. I'm trying to work out how to do all of this dungeon and navigate it. I like that side of things. You know, I like having little characters that stand about and tell you a charming or interesting one thing that they have to say. I like all of that side of it. It's just the standard combat system hasn't worked for me since I was like a teenager, really. And yeah, the stealth thing here works very well. The thing that's great about the stealth thing as well is you maybe don't have to use it in every dungeon with every enemy type, right? There might be certain enemy types that just always know you're there and rush you, or some that just don't know you're there, like the eyeballs, and you bump into them. And that's a nice way of like making the way that the combat is instigated feel different each time, if you want to go down that route of varying it. Is that oh, but yeah, I think the JRPG thing is, a lot of it comes down to grind, and like what was the purpose of grind in games. And like if you play Fortnite or any of those games of service games now, or Helldivers or whatever, the way that they implement grind and the reason they do it is very, very similar to the reason that Pokemon did it, right? You know, Pokemon, reasonably simple actual combat system that you're doing, but it rewards you for having a wide variety of collected creatures and for spending the time leveling them up. And then, you know, exploring the world to find things to level them up as well. It's about using your kind of accumulation as power as a reward system, right? Yeah, I've played Secret of Mana. basically, in my teens was when I got really, really into emulators, and I went back and played a lot of these games that I'd missed. So played Secret of Mana, played Chrono Trigger, played whichever the Sega one was that was like this. The Sega equivalent of Final Fantasy was the Shining in the games, and the thing that was interesting about them is they were all in a totally different format. So one was a first-person dungeon crawler, one was a top-down real-time game. They were all totally different subgenres of RPG. But I think, yeah, but basically I'm not... I think I'm just trying to get people to think about what grinding is for. And you can have it just to make things take an artificially long amount of time. Which, I don't know. I don't know if that feels respectful of people's time, especially in the context of a small indie game. And then in modern gacha games, like Puzzle and Dragons and stuff like that, it started to get used for a monetization reason where they're like, okay, you know, to complete this area, you need a really high-level ice character or you just can't do it. And that's kind of the same rationale of like how Pokemon works, but used for more evil purposes. Can we... Ah, big eyeball. Oh, it's a timing thing. There we go. Big mama eyeball. You need to forget that I've got my charge. Oof. The so Dev, I would say don't. I think the difficulty feels fine, especially if this is a little way into the game. I know I'm dying a lot, but I'm also distracted, so don't worry too much about this as a read on if it's too difficult. Although I am going back to the checkpoint and not healing. Is there a way that I can actively heal? I've got some coffee. Is that a... Yeah. Okay. Let's. Have a pickle. Have some beef jerky. They both get some beef jerky. Have a hard-boiled egg. There we go. If I go out and come back in, will it checkpoint me again with my full health now? Ah, I love to get a hard-boiled egg from a chest in a cave. My favourite. Okay, remember your spells. That's a great reuse of the same animation as well. So it's got that that kind of hiding thing it does, and it's doing it in the combat as well. So we sort of already know that we need to do the timing minigame with that. Okay, now we've removed all of those little tentacles. I think there was some back this way that were in the way of stuff. Did they go all the way back here? I don't think they did they? No. Hotwell said, I worry about some of the trend people are doing with RPGs is just replacing the turn-based with action, when that isn't the main problem people have with it. I mean, I wouldn't say it's the main problem people have with it, but I would say that there's an interesting thing with turn-based combat in games where I think some developers sort of go towards it because they think it's going to be easier. Because they think, well, if I'm doing action, I need to do all of these great animations and I need it to feel really good. And I'm more of a sort of data and UI driven dev, so I'll go for turn-based. And that's a very decent rationale for making that choice. But then I think if you do turn-based combat, then you need to have quite a big variety of situations in which the turn-based combat feels very different, right? And obviously there's a massive scale of, I would say you've got like XCOM on one end of the scale, right? Where it's this very sort of simulationist board game, which is basically trying to represent a real space with characters moving around in it fighting, with their vision and everything. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got something that is more kind of chess-like and abstract, like Death Howl or Into the Breach, which is on a very small grid. And in both of those situations, you need to have like quite a wide variety of like, how does the board configuration or the space that you're in modify how it feels to do the combat? You know, so if you're playing an XCOM-like and every battle feels the same because it's just a big empty space, then now you don't have those tactical interactions between like who's got what weapon and what cover is available and is there like a elevation bonus for being on a height. You don't have all of that unless you have quite a robust kit of different weapons with different properties and different environmental pieces. And then when you go to the like Into the Breach side, you have the same thing, but maybe it's a little bit more about like being able to manipulate characters spatially, because the thing that Into the Breach did very well, and I think Death Howl does a similar thing. And if you haven't played Death Howl, it came out recently. It's like a Into the Breach abstract chess-like combat thing on a grid, but with a deck builder to drive the moves. And in those types of games, I think you need a bit more emphasis on like pushing the characters around and into environmental hazards and stuff, because that makes good use of how small the grid is. Whereas if you go back to XCOM again, and you've got a massive grid with hundreds of spaces in a given combat, then the chance that you're going to be able to push someone down a hole is very, very small. Which is why when you pull stuff like that off in something like Baldur's Gate 3, it feels really good. Like with the Barbarian, you can like pick someone up and throw them down a hole. And it feels great, but it's an incredibly rare thing to pull off. And that's in a game that has the entire, 5th edition D&D rule set to draw from like all of its character variations in their moves and stuff they can do like that. So I think there are good reasons for avoiding doing turn-based combat, and that is that like just doing like button bashing fighting in an action game, I think people can put up with doing the same thing over and over again more in that context than just like playing a very, very similar turn-based combat with not enough variation in it over and over again. So I think there's something in the design pattern for how easily it stands up to scrutiny in a game that doesn't have as much content variety. I might be talking completely out of my arse, but when I sit down and I think about the types of games I'd like to make, I'd love to make an Into the Breach or an XCOM or a Darkest Dungeon, but I think they only really shine when you have like dozens and dozens of varieties of weapons and stuff like that. Just going back and seeing what people are saying. No, it's fine. I think that was a good question. It's a very general question as well. It's not just specifically about the game. And, like the dev said, this demo is only like half an hour long, so... It smells tingly. Is this where we're going to learn how we can do stuff with these gravity things? I keep seeing these and I don't know what to do with them yet. That's good though. Like, I think seeing the lock multiple times before you get the key is a good sort of level design structure. You're not with... Anyways, doesn't matter. Okay, I got attacked by the sea monsters. I did my best, but... You're not alone. Here at the end... Blitz's accent keeps changing, I'm sorry.
I'm not dying, you bozo. Just busted my ankle. I don't want no trouble with the army neither, so I'm gonna hunker here. Take my spurs. You can put them to better use. Okay? You got the Grav Mag spurs. Oh, I think I know what these are going to be for. Burnt gravity. Grind spurs. Kicks a saddle onto burnt gravity. Use a pickaxe there to get those things. There we go. Now we can grind along the gravity rails. It's leaking magic stink. It's leaking magic stink. Don't know why I need to know about the magic stink. Nothing to do up there. Go back, look for things that we can gravity grind along. Don't think pushing these does anything, but maybe there is some situation where it will do. Neat. You can shoot them as well. It's leaking magic stink. Burnt gravity. The earthquake's out all these Ichorite crystals. The bleed will stay nearby gravity, but we can contain it. A matching pair will form a ley line. Ah, okay. There you go. So you get the gravity things by breaking two. That's really cool. That's a really good little great way of adding variety to the dungeons. Okay, now we've got the gravity spurs and we can grind across these, and some of them require us to smash the two correct corresponding bleeding crystals. These ones, the ones that have the orangey red in them. Big pufferfish guy giving what's the Junji Ito one about the fish? Big yo. Basically can't trigger combat with those guys without walking into them, which is quite annoying. Yeah, this is great. This is one of the best things with this kind of flavor that I've played in a long time. I feel like the tone of the writing and the world building is very on point for what someone would like if they like this kind of art style and everything as well. Like, it's not a massive, like, cliche of someone trying to write their own Phantasy Star type thing, you know, which it could be. And I think a lot of Western games that look like this, they fall into this trap of just trying to be as authentically Japanese as they can be. And this feels like it could be authentic, but it's not doing that kind of fan servicey, I know so much about anime thing that I think some people in that particular creative community are often prone to do. You know, Like the amount of JRPG of RPG Maker games which are just like, I don't know, how many culturally accurate Japanese foodstuffs can I put in my game and stuff like that. And it's not quite doing that, but it still does feel like it kind of comes out of the culture that this is visually referencing quite well. Right, yeah, Fish, I think you put it much more clearly than I could. It's very easy to see a game like this and just think it's going to have terrible writing. And when I think when I think of terrible writing, I think of like anime melodrama, which isn't necessarily terrible by everyone's standards, right? But just characters just like overly emotionally gushing about things that I don't care about yet. That's kind of what I expect when I see this art style, and it's just not been that. We've got, you know, two characters with very clear characterization, and a couple of little conflicts, and there's enough there for you to kind of get invested in the world and care about what's going on in the fiction, but it's not trying to make you sort of super upset about the evils of this world or anything too early on. Feels just about right, tone-wise. Okay, so we've gone across here. We didn't really find anything. That's not linked to every... Oh, maybe I need to shoot one. Is there one I need to shoot? Okay. That one takes me across to there. Yeah, I keep forgetting I can blow these up from a distance. So that links to that one, and then I go back over here. This is a great spatial puzzle. I think some of those puzzles, you're probably not going to be able to repeat them in every dungeon, or it's going to feel very repetitive, but that can be a puzzle format that comes around over and over again in the game, but I wouldn't necessarily want to use it everywhere. Original character, do not copy. Yeah. Someone sent in a game that they'd made like that recently, and I started playing it offline, and I was just like, I'm not gonna play this on a stream, because it was someone's sort of own kind of furry OCs that they obviously cared a lot about, but they weren't making the game to like try and make a game. They were making the game as a vehicle for their intellectual property, and that meant that there was nothing I could say that was going to be like make a positive impact on them, because they weren't making it with the goal of making a good game. You know, they were making it with the goal of expanding this sort of universe of stuff in their head. And I don't think there's a way that I can kind of interact with that type of person in a way that's kind to them and meets them where they are. I think the whole kind of deviant art, Tumblr art, kind of fan community art thing is something that just totally passed me by in my own head. You know, if I draw a character, you can, if you don't know who it is, then it's an OC. I'm not putting tags on stuff to tell you that I made up the thing that I made up, or like fake legalese. It is the case in, yeah, it is a younger writing spaces thing, but also because everyone's anonymous, some people just never grow out of it because they just, that's their kind of cultural norm, and they don't necessarily have that association of it being like a teenage thing. Nice little incidental kind of retutorialization, like reminding us that we can switch character when I'm not doing it. Where to draw on the line between OC and just like normal world building? I mean, there isn't one, is there? It's just a sort of subcultural thing that people do to try and get people to like respect that something is theirs and not copy it. I think. But it does have that very like naive, oh no, people are going to copy my ideas thing, and it's like, I mean, I always just think, you know, worry about that sort of thing when it actually starts happening. Right, yeah, because it's a original character within an established universe. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just very, yeah, it's funny to call things OCs when they're like, when it's your entire, you made up the whole world. We just... That takes us back up there. Okay, this all loops back round. I feel like there was one in the caves where I didn't link up the two bits because I forgot that you could use the gun. So I'm going to go back and just do one last check. This is a good sign though. This is like an indication that I care, that the game is making me care, that I want to go back and check that I didn't. So there's one there that I missed. There we go. I knew there was one somewhere that I hadn't got. And that just gets us whatever that is. It gets us a pog. The boss. Cast magic spells. Okay. There was a pog that I hadn't got. We need to unblock that one. The dungeon design in this is great. I just love the fact that we keep coming back and looping through the same space and going like through different directions with different traversal abilities and stuff. It's really neat. Go back up there. A new drop ladder. That goes back down here again. Okay, cool.
There's lots of, like, dying sea life that's washed up on the ground. Found a pog. There's a special door up there. I'm so glad you've given us that kind of look around feature. Take cover! Shh. It's the big bad.
Something smells funny. It smells like the smell of great things ahead of us, boys.
Huzzah!
And everyone else can suck it.
He's got such a good set of animations. Oh my god.
We have the source of the Ichor. Soon we will have limitless magic at our command.
Huzzah!
You will find wealth beyond your dreams.
Huzzah! Okay, so the town is called Rome. I don't think this is set in the real world at all. It's just there is a town called Rome, and it's Roman themed.
You will slay Mad Puss.
Huzzah! It's true.
And so on and so on and blah blah blah. Look, bros, I gotta be real with you. Empires rise and fall. Technology comes and goes. Man reaches new heights, then crumbles. Society rebuilds. It always pulls itself apart. It always rises again and falls. And from what I've seen, fellas, your civ's on its last legs. And we can't change that. But we can profit from it. They said not to do it. They said it never works out. Don't mess with the cycle of civilizations. But there's plenty of stars in the sky.
The fact that he has all of these separate animations, like he just did a scare quotes, bunny ears.
We can all become galactic conquerors. Each one of us, fellas, king of your own planet. Dig this hustle.
How to become a space conqueror. Okay, we're getting dialogue choices in a dialogue that our main characters aren't. Soldier, what's the plan? Soldier, tell me more. Tell me more, tell me more. What's the catch? We've got Owl, fake voice. Gee, boss, sounds evil. We're going to do the tell me more, summer loving option.
When you first land, make it look like a crash. If it seems like you're stranded, they'll trust you easier. Naturally, share some of your alien technology. Teach them to burn Ichor. You want to keep the secret of anti-grav to yourself. In your case, bros, you already taught yourselves how to burn Ichor, so I shared anti-grav. Huzzah! Either way, you gotta get yourself in good with the guys who make the rules. Bootstrapping their tech to your level of your comfort might take a decade or so string them along each step of the way. In the meantime, you can beat up anyone you want because your muscles have ingested chemical X for the past 800 years in your space pod. Oh yeah, feels good to be the champ. Bet you want a belt like this one, huh?
Technically, the title belt belongs to me.
Dig this hustle.
Gee, boss, sounds evil.
Nothing evil about it, just your old goofy pal gotta make a living, ha ha ha.
Nice try.
Dig this hustle.
Let's get out of here. Great. So we get the villain shows up and does the, ha ha ha, I'm going to take over the world expository. We have dialogue options in it, even though our characters aren't involved, which might feel strange and unusual, but it's a great way of making the length of that scene optional. And then we get this, like, we can interject and try and trick him and go, gee, boss, sounds evil. Who's over there? Is that Axolotl? Jump down. We'll jump down. Sure. I'm going to have to move on to the second game in a moment. We will rest and heal here. That's great. I think this game is just like every part of this game is working very, very well for me. Everything works well together. Just the quality of everything here. This is all release quality. You know, we're getting a section of the game that is a vertical slice. It doesn't start us right at the beginning, so, you know, we're quite light on tutorials and gradually introducing stuff, but everything here is great. The level design is really nice. The fact that we are being pulled around the level in lots of different directions and seeing things from different angles as we like unlock these different movement skills. I do think you can't necessarily repeat the gravity grind thing in every environment you're in, because it's going to start to feel tedious, and you know, you might have like a dungeon design cadence where, say, A is like a dungeon with these gravity crystals, and B is something else, and C is something else, and you go A, B, C, A, B, C, and then you start to combine them together. I don't know. It feels really good, though. Like, the tone of the writing is great. Characterization is good. Brilliant villain. Lots about this world that makes me want to learn about it, because it's strange, and there's, like, weird stuff going on in the fiction here that kind of pulls me into it and makes me want to answer questions, but it's not giving me the answers to those questions very readily, which is a mistake that lots of people make when they try and start doing fantasy writing. It's just telling you too much about the world rather than, you know, showing the player or showing the audience something strange and letting them wonder about it and start to have their own curiosity about it, and then gradually drip feed information about what and why things are as a reward for playing the game. I think that's a much stronger way of approaching science fiction and fantasy writing in games, and I think this does it very, very well. And there's just a good balance of comedic elements with stuff which feels kind of, I wouldn't say serious, but stuff that feels like it takes the fiction of the world seriously. It's very difficult to strike a balance with comedy writing in games like this. I tend to find that people do too much like nudge nudge, wink wink, fourth wall breaking, rather than comedy that just sort of like would work if this was a scene in a movie or something like that. And the way that the villain is written is very good in that regard. Yeah, there's just lots to like here. I think this is great. Let's move on to the other game for today's stream. Thanks for sending that one in. And just as Connor said, it needs to focus more on the unusual sections when advertising. The WrestleMan is very entertaining. He's right here on the start screen as well. Great. And I think there's just so much going on in that game that inspires confidence in the rest of the game. You know, I think when you see that level of attention to detail, like you see the fact that Zaug has got all of these different animation poses and stuff like that, it just kind of inspires confidence that the rest of the game is going to be of that quality. Whereas when you see a vertical slice demo and there's loads of little ropey broken stuff about it and it doesn't feel that visually polished, that to me often, it depends what type of game it is. Some games it doesn't matter, but often to me that just communicates that the developer doesn't care enough about these things to want to get them right before showing it to like thousands of people. You know, ropey demo with lots of placeholder art and everything, that's fine for like small scale testing, but I think as soon as you're putting things on Steam, there's a degree to which you're basically saying, this is a product now, this is what I'm making, this is roughly the quality it will be at. And that's because to me, you know, Steam is a storefront. It is a marketplace, and that means that products that you put on Steam, you can use Steam for R&D, you can do playtests and stuff on it and all of that kind of stuff. But I feel like once you get to that level, you're starting to say, look, I've committed to this, I've paid the upload fee, and I'm making this. And I think if you haven't got your art style worked out and you haven't got the polish worked out, and I'm not necessarily saying that everything needs to be polished, but showing people what your VFX will be like, showing people what your audio will be like, showing people what all of these parts of your game will be like, I think that's important once you're at that stage. And if you're not at that stage, just use itch and, you know, send people builds on the internet and stuff like that. Okay, this is... Sorry, what was it called? This is Echo of God. This is more of a platformery, Metroidvania-y format. Yeah, 2 people saying the title of the last game. It doesn't feel as playful as the tone of the game, I guess. Wake up. Come into the forest. Please wake up, we need you. These are developer notes. Okay, interesting. It's a very pretty forest. Duck is a cower. Pause there with an inventory. Abilities, collectibles, status, chains, audio, settings. Okay. Character controller feels great here. Jumping and landing sound design, very nice. There's a weird stuck frame there if I run up against this. Don't mind if I get me a strange sword from a wood. I think sometimes we're zooming in a little bit too far for these animations. I noticed that earlier. Like, I feel like this is already about as far as you want to zoom in with this kind of style and fidelity of pixel art. I don't think we should be moving the camera in closer. You know, if anything, maybe the standard camera should be a little bit further out, and then when you want to zoom in, it comes into this range. Because the whole appeal of this type of pixel art is it's not showing every single thing in detail. It's leaving your brain to fill in the gaps. When you zoom all the way in, it's like standing next to a pointillist painting a little bit. But the art of this generally looks lovely, and there's lots of little kind of effects and, you know, stuff going on with the trees that purists won't like. But I don't think you need to worry too much about them when you are making your game, but I do think it looks bad when we're zoomed in too far. Something opened up above. Yeah, that main font is really chunky as well. Makes it a little bit hard to read. I don't think I can make that jump. Nope, it's just slightly too far.
I think if you're watching people playtest and they are all doing that, what I just did as well, it's probably an indication that this gap is annoyingly close to being jumpable. So maybe make it bigger. Unless that's supposed to be something we come back and dash over in a minute or something. It said something opened up above. I think given what this game is doing with all of the shaders and stuff, I would be tempted to just Celeste it and not use any pixel font. You know, just pick a font where the line weight roughly matches the size of the pixels, or is like exactly half the size. Yeah, that was jumpable, and it took me 3 attempts. Press Y to interact. Press Y to interact with what? What are you telling me to interact with? No, don't hurt me. Wow, thank you. What was that? Okay. If I go off the screen and press Y, there's that. I feel like I'm doing QA rather than playtesting a game at the moment, I'm afraid. Right, we've picked up the sword, but it's still there. Okay, it told me something opened, but I don't know what it is. I'm going to go back to the right edge of the screen, and then if that doesn't do anything, I'll restart, because I think something's broken. Again, it feels like we're doing that thing where we've started our game with the tutorial because we think that's what a finished game needs to start with. And that's not what you need to show me for me to be able to test your game and tell you what about your game needs to be better. Because at the moment, this is a tutorial that just seems bugged and I can't get out of it. Right? I'm going to quit and restart and see if we can unblock it. It told me something unlocked, and there's no clear indication of where it is. So we're kind of sweating the small stuff now. So Dev, if you're watching this back, everyone in the chat giving you really handy stuff about like the art direction, the way the pixels are handled the typography and everything. But the bigger issue here is you've dropped me into the first 5 or 10 minutes of your idea of what this final game would be like. And I would be able to give you much more helpful feedback on this game as if we had a vertical slice of like deeper into the game. But you've arranged this like a tutorial in a commercial game. And that means that there's a barrier to me even getting to what the gameplay of your game is. You know, I want to see what your actual game is in terms of what the player is doing in the game. I couldn't get to it because of a bug or because something in the game wasn't communicated very well. And I don't need
you know, when a game is in this state, I don't need to do this intro dialogue sequence to set the mood. It's just one of those projects where I think someone is rushing to make their thing feel like a finished game. Okay, that's what opened, was that wall over there moved out of the way. But we wouldn't have known because it's a cliff and it doesn't look like an object that would move. So when we go back up, that wall being raised is what happened after we got the sword. But it doesn't look like a door or anything, so it's just like part of the normal cliffs of the level has moved, and you're expecting the player to remember what it was when you go back up there. Okay, we've got the sword. There's nothing to do over here. We have to go back up. But yeah, someone talking about incoherence. Like, the very arcadey thing of picking up whatever those were doesn't feel like it goes with the rest of the game as well. So something opened up above. Okay, we got this before. It tells us something opened up above. And then if we go back up... Right, so if you think about what happened when I first approached this, I came in from here, I ran across, there was a big cliff here, but your players are barely going to notice that that cliff is there, because as they come across here, they can see that the only way is down. So you come through here, there's a cliff there, there's clearly nothing over here, this isn't a door or a gate or anything, and the only way is down, so you just sort of focus on going down there, and you go down there, and that means that when you come back up and you know that something has opened up here, you're not even necessarily going to be aware that this side of the screen used to be a cliff, which was what happened to me the first time I played this, right? So that needs to be a gateway. So yeah, the dev said that this is supposed to be a JRPG pretending to be a Metroidvania. So we're going to get like an inventory of items and spells, and we're going to talk to characters and stuff. But it's a Metroidvania platformer, which, I mean, yeah, but that's also just what Hollow Knight is, you know? Like, a Metroidvania traditionally doesn't have those RPG elements of, you know, picking up things and leveling things up. So, you know, that's not like a unique blend of things. So we go here and it says press Y to interact. And I go over there and it says, no, don't hurt me. Wow. Thank you. Right, so we have to run. We have to keep pressing right way after the character is off the screen to make it load the next area. That was the problem. I don't know what's happening here. Is there like some weird... Is there some camera thing where I can't see everything that I'm supposed to be able to see? Oh, look. The camera was broken. So when I was pressing Y, this guy was talking to me. No, don't hurt me. Wow, thank you. Okay. I really trusted you were a good person. Stop, please. Okay, yeah, this is like placeholder debug stuff. So go back and read the developer's notes again for a second. So yeah, this is the one who said they're a musician mainly. It's a passion project. It feels very much like, you know, like someone said in the chat, it feels like you've seen the Game Maker's Toolkit Celeste video or someone's video on like
how to recreate Hollow Knight, and you've kind of gone through all the paces of doing all of those art elements, but you really, really need to focus on what your gameplay is and what the player is supposed to be experiencing and thinking about before you dress a game up like this. It is absolutely backwards to spend so much time on the visual look of a game before you have a game. And it can be a fun thing to do if what you're trying to do is learn how to do bits of programming and learn how to do pixel art stuff. But that doesn't necessarily lead you to a place where the thing is going to be interesting or exciting to engage with. So far, we've just had a overly long, overly confusing first 10 minutes of the game, and now I've hit this point where there's some weird bugged camera thing where I walk off the screen and I'm still in the level, and if I keep walking right I'll get to the next bit. And also there's this weird character off screen that has a heavy black outline and says what feels like placeholder text, and I'm always a little bit wary of that as well. When you make an RPG, you go back and watch my review for something called Geoland. You make an RPG and you've decided to work in that genre, and it's a genre that has lots of characters standing around saying stuff, and then you make them say stuff that feels like a fourth wall breaking developer note or a little in-joke. It's like, well, if you're not invested enough in practicing writing what these characters would actually say, why are you making this genre of game? You know, because it's a genre of game that requires you to do lots of writing. So either do the writing or don't put it in. That's why I rolled back loads of the narrative elements in my own game recently, because I thought, hang on, I don't actually want to do this part of the dev. So why am I making that style of game? Just stripped all of the narrative back out because I realized I was dreading writing the dialogue. Right, yeah, Hot Worlds. Why do you go into the basement and backtrack through nothing? Yeah, and the part of the problem is, let's kill a slime, because it's a video game, so it's a slime. Part of the problem for me is, as well, that all of this very video gamey stuff, like, there's just randomly a door opens, and it's a wall, and that stuff is more forgivable if you're doing a more abstract Mario, or even Braid, those types of platformers, which is not trying to represent a real place. But as soon as you start trying to represent a real place and make something that looks a bit more naturalistic and is more in the Metroidvania space than the trad platformer space, then you do need narrative reasons for everything happening. And in this setting, like, even if you had, after we picked up this order, there was a big switch downstairs and then a big gate opened upstairs, that would be better. But even then, we're gone in this direction of making it more naturalistic, and that means it's going to be strange when there's like these contraptions in the middle of a wood that don't seem to be part of any other structure, you know? Frosty Jim said, the fact that the sound and visuals are quite polished, if not cohesive in parts, puts high expectations on the rest of the game. Yes, exactly. But you really need to build the parts that make it a game first. And it makes sense to try and iterate on everything as you go along. But this feels a little bit like the developer has found the parts that they enjoy doing and focused on them. I can't tell if I'm supposed to be able to make some of it, because there was that early jump that was really tight. I now don't trust my own judgment of like how far I can jump. Attack enemies to gain spirit. Spirit allows you to heal, use abilities, and many more along your adventure. Green means you have enough to use towards anything. Okay. We also don't have a very clear differentiation behind when is this a wall and when is it a background platform. That's not super clear.
I mean, I think if we got rid of all the problems we discussed so far, right? Let's imagine the game this could be. If we got rid of all the problems that we discussed so far, technical problems, fiction problems, all of the various issues people are seeing with the art, which I personally don't see. I would be fine with the art the way that it is if you dealt with the font. You know, I think it looks okay if it felt better. But if we put all of those things to one side, I don't understand what type of game this is. I don't understand what skills I'm supposed to be being tested on. It's not showing me what type of game it is. Right? And I think your game needs to do that very quickly. Like, show the player what type of game it is, and then all of your flavor and your art direction and any story stuff can come in gradually once people know what they're doing. And what I don't really understand what skills this is supposed to test, because we don't have a very robust combat system from what I've seen so far. We just automatic 2-hit combo. Very simple enemies. The combat also doesn't feel good, right? So there's nothing about this combat that feels inherently rewarding to do. So already I'm thinking, well, this is not a combat-oriented game. So what is it? Because the platforming doesn't feel rewarding to do. Navigating the levels isn't interesting so far. And I think going back to that question of what type of game is this, not in terms of thinking of a genre, but in terms of what skills is this supposed to test? Because when you start with genre, your genre is supposed to, genre as a player helps you to identify like what is going to happen to you when you play this game. You know, is this a game that's constantly going to be trying to kill you? Is it a game that's going to give you puzzles to do? Is it a game that's going to test your reaction skills or your strategy, your strategic planning skills? That's what genre does for players. And as a developer, it should do the same thing. It should be like a blueprint of what skills are being tested here. And the platforming here is quite awkward. There are lots of jumps that are just slightly too far. And that doesn't feel like a very fun challenge at the start of the game. Like someone said, the full speed is quite harsh for this type of platformer as well. And it's kind of like you've put together all of these elements because you think, oh, it's a Metroidvania. It needs platforming and combat and picking up items and stuff. But so far, none of them are kind of combining in a way that feels compelling to me and makes me want to play it more. Because I'm not having a skill tested apart from my resolve to continue playing the game. I can make it across. Oh, can you? I mean, I don't think you can. Oh, no, you can't. Okay. Press M to use map. I'm not using I'm using a controller. You told me to use a controller. Look for and attack cracked walls to find secret areas. Again, like... Okay, B is heal. Secret area there. Straight up just telling me to break cracked walls. Why is the camera up there now? Oh, I know what it is. If I go into a new area while I'm in mid-jump, the camera gets stuck. But there's like an invisible bit of a wall at the bottom of that break, so I have to jump to get into the new area. And then if you jump into the new area, the camera's in a weird place. And all that's in there is one crate. Heal when you have spirit to heal. Press again to stop on color. Green heals the most. Okay, yeah, I've already done that by accident. Thanks, when I was trying to get out of the map. So, comparing this to like 9 Souls that I started playing recently, at this point in the game, we have fought so many dudes, and the game has sort of told us what type of game it is.
And I think that's the problem with this game, is it has an identity identity crisis where it's not sure what type of skill it's meant to test. And I think if you can answer that question, then you can make an interesting game. But walking up to things and smashing a button to hit a sword does not a interesting combat game make. So you either need to make the combat interesting or make it a different type of game. And now we're getting a boss, even though... So what does a boss do in game design? A boss is meant to test the skills that we've established and learned up to that point. What skills have I learned that this boss is supposed to test? Let's try again. 3 slimes and then a boss. Yeah, exactly. We keep doing these weird zooms. Like, work with your medium. Pixel art does not want you to zoom in on it this far. And I'm not being a purist. I'm not saying you can't zoom with pixel art at all. I do it in my game. Zooming in so far that it's like you're in a gallery standing next to a pointillist painting, looking at it too close. That might be an interesting thing to do in a gallery when you're looking at a pointillist painting. It's not an interesting thing to do when you're looking at a video game. That little micro game for the healing, cool idea. I like the fact that the green section changes each time and isn't always directly in the middle. I mean, the demo does need to show the game sooner, but I think the problem is that the developer doesn't really know what type of game they're making. And they've built all of these systems for like a big dream game project. So if we go into the pause menu, you can see all of these different systems. And I don't think they've worked out what the core of their game is before spinning off and doing all this other stuff. You know? Add boss defeated animation and sound. Create boss that fits in world. Show warning for shockwave. Okay, that's their developer notes. Fine. Again, it's just a bit too polished in the wrong directions. I don't ever want to hear what characters have to say in a game that's at this stage. So abilities, collectibles, monster's horn, the horn of the monster, status, chains. It's just got really big ambitions, this game, and I think the amount of care put into making these enemies either look cool or be interesting to fight is too low for a game that is going to be combat focused. But I don't see anything about the level design that could make this any other type of game either. You know, we're not getting the interesting stuff we saw in the last game about like gradually unlocking different traversal abilities to get around the level and all of that kind of stuff. And that was just within 10 minutes of playing that last game. Yeah, that's not a Metroidvania level, is it? That's a Rainbow Islands Pac-Land level.
Right, we're going to give this one... Right, we can time jump. How do we do that? So I missed... Okay, we've got a little air dash now. Yeah, I think I don't understand who this character is, why we're here. And the thing is, I don't want that explained to me through story. I think when I pick up a game like this, I want to be able to see what is supposed to be cool about the character and how it relates to their abilities. And I want the character design and the world design and the art to speak to that in a way that doesn't require any dialogue. And that's not to say that the game shouldn't have any dialogue, but I think before you even start to put any explicit story in your game needs to have this quality to it where you can just look at it and you see the character and you know what they do. Right, like if you see the character from Nine Souls, you know they're going to be a magical samurai, and then from that you can sort of extrapolate what the rest of the game is. Where this is just a random kid. And I think random kid protagonist works in certain circumstances. Like it works in Limbo because it's a horror game and it makes you feel vulnerable. And that's a game where you can't fight. You're not a fighting character. And then if you think about Zelda... we always come back to Link whenever we're talking about character design, but Link, the way that Link is visually designed is he looks like a kid that is trying to be older than he is, right? Like Link is a kid role-playing as a knight. And that lets you know that this is going to be a fantasy game about fighting things, because the character is a little knight with a sword, but they look a little bit weak and scrawny. And that also helps to indicate that this is a game where sometimes you're going to have to do like the cunning option rather than it's got like brains before brawn, you know? Sometimes you're going to have to think about how to use bombs or how to break things, and it's not about being like a big strong character that can kill everything. And all of these choices, like the way that a character looks and the way that the character is visually designed, just tells you what the game is. And that happens at every end of the platformer spectrum. Like, you look at Shovel Knight, you know what's happening. You look at Hollow Knight, you know what the game's going to be about. And I think when you just make your character like a average little kid, that to me says, okay, this is a character that's supposed to be vulnerable and not like a cool character that I'm supposed to aspire to sort of level up and get all these abilities with. Like, why have we gone into this magical wood, and why are we getting these abilities, and how does it relate to what type of character we are? And don't do that through dialogue. Do it through, like, visual clues. Like, make the kid like a little Sorcerer's Apprentice kid. You know, use the Sorcerer's Apprentice trope, and you're halfway there. Oh, you need to do your you need to do your trial to become a real witch. Go into the woods. Find these magical things. And again, when I say this, I'm not saying immediately put in story in the game that explains this. Just make it very obvious. Oh, we've gone into a specifically magical woods. We're a type of character that's going to be able to harness that magic, and that's why, you know, when we find this thing, now we can air jump and stuff like that. Yeah, that was Valerie, the one with the bubbles. That was a great example of, like, you know, go all the way back to Sonic and Mario, and it's just like, okay, the world is designed around the character, and they have a symbiotic relationship where, okay, it might not make sense to have a world with all these loop-the-loops in, but when you've got a character that, like, goes so fast that they turn into a little spinning ball thing, it does make sense to have a world full of loop-the-loops. But I think it's just going slightly too far in this kind of naturalistic Miyazaki movie thing and just making it a real-looking character, and that's a problem from a marketing standpoint, but it's also just, I think it ties into this problem of the game doesn't know what it is, and it has an identity problem in terms of understanding
what the player is supposed to get out of doing any of this. Yeah, it really feels like someone has watched a lot of kind of art tutorials on how to make a good platform or a Metroidvania and sort of not answer some of the broader things. Like, even floating platforms, it feels a bit more strange when we're doing a world with these humanoid, realistic looking characters. There's some sort of elf woman. We've done that thing again where we've come in off the screen and we have to run on the screen. How do I talk to you? Yeah, the Tory gates. I mean, they did say that they wanted it to be more like a JRPG than a Metroidvania, but at the moment I'm just seeing a Metroidvania with some dialogue in. It was a good bear, yeah. Tree trunks are gathered by me. Gathered all by myself. Hi, stranger. I wanted to go adventure in the caves, but shh, don't tell anyone, it's off limits to everyone, except the really strong barrels. That one's got squirrel. They're squirrel bears. They've got squirrel tails. I don't understand why the camera keeps... I go into a new area and I load off the screen and I have to run in into the shot. Can we go in there? But why not? Myra weak. If Myra get hurt, we feel it too. It very dark. Myra cannot see inside. Stay please, okay? We protect you always. The cave, not where Myra will go. Ah, I can't stand any of you. Move! What was all that about? The sun doesn't reach inside a cave, right? Well, sometimes. It's worth a shot. Okay. The strident young woman has gone in a cave. We're going to follow her. I'll show them. I'll clear out the caves, then they'll have no other okay. Let me go and clear out the caves. Who are you? I saw you barge into that house during my conversation. I'm Lynn Rockfield. I'm lost. I'm looking to find my way back to my home. I'm trying to solve a riddle, and I think a cave could be the solution. You can't go there. It's off limits. I can't even go there. A voice told me to go to the cave. You also need help going to the cave, right? Well, the voice also led me to a monster. Maybe I shouldn't listen to it. Okay, I just got a character that yells at us a lot. That's fine. Whatever. Yes, I beat up a monster. Okay, you know that I'm brave and I can beat up a monster. Let's do the next bit of the game. Yeah, I'm not reading this. There's too much. Especially with that very difficult to read font. This one is fine at this size, but then they've scaled it up to use in the main text, and I think just either keep it the same size for the dialogue, or... Okay, an interesting game mechanic. How did we do that? So I just skipped. So this is the problem. I talked about this when we were playing card games a few weeks ago. If you put so much dialogue that people are getting into the habit of skipping it, then when you give people vital information, they've already checked out, and that's what just happened then. I got a new ability. I don't know how it works because I was just... Yeah, no story for so long and now everything at once. I need to go into the cave. No, it's dangerous, I'm telling you. Well, I'm going anyway. End scene. Yeah. I think this is just one of those projects where you're having to sort of learn too many new skills at once. And this is why people tell you to make small games. I think a good way of approaching writing in your games as well, if you're going to have little interrupting sequences like that where there's dialogue, approach it like UX. And what I mean by that is to just have a set of rules about how many lines of dialogue can be in any one scene. And say, okay, there can only be, in a scene between two characters, there can only be 4 or 5 lines of dialogue maximum. And in a scene where there's 3 characters talking, maybe there can be 7 or something like that. I'm not saying those are the numbers you need to use, but if you have some sort of rule, then it will make your game feel consistent, because most dialogues will be the same length of time. And you won't have that experience we just had, where there's been like no talking in the game, all platforming, and then suddenly there's all these conversations and it's like, where is this coming from? But yeah, especially if you're coming from a background where you're not a professional writer, that felt like it was just loads of extra text because you were trying to make it feel like a naturalistic conversation, which is sort of how fanfic conversations read, because they make the characters say everything multiple times rather than going for efficiency. Are you going to stop and do that every single time I pick one up now? I think a lot of this is just pointing me in the direction of, like, I've said this before, I say this on the Discord all the time when people say, when should I playtest? And it's like, well, early and frequently, but be prepared for the fact that if you leave a load of stuff in your game that you know doesn't work properly and isn't how you'd want it to be, and isn't basically MVP, right? Minimum viable product. Be prepared for that to be the only stuff people notice when they play the game. And then at that point, you have to think, well, how useful is my playtest if 90% of the information I get back from the playtest is people telling you stuff that you already know, right? So when I go into this area and I pick up those heart pieces, and the first one tells me, get 4 of these to get a new heart. Great. And then the second one does it again. The third, that's really annoying. And you know it's annoying. So if you leave that in your playtest, you know that people are just going to tell you something you already know. Right? If the purpose of a playtest is to gather information, then you want to limit that, because you don't want all the feedback you get to be people telling you stuff that you already know. So it's much better to give people a much smaller playtest where everything is as good as you can get it.
Because what this actually is just like, this is a big messy prototype of how you see the entirety of the game working, with places where there's missing things and lack of polish, and you put these developer notes in to say temporary asset. That's basically an apology. You know, you're putting a thing in saying temporary asset, this is not how this thing should be. It's like, okay, that doesn't make it any better to test, right? Because you're supposed to be testing, like, what is someone else's experience when they play the game? And putting a little apology in and saying this isn't the final asset is like, yeah, so whatever. Like, if either give me something that is so ugly that it's very clear what project stage it's at, and I can just test the gameplay, or if you're going to give people something this polished, make it much smaller, make it a real vertical slice, and don't try and stretch it out in all of these directions, which is what has happened here. Right, Hot World said, you should watch playtests in person until people are willing to play it for an hour unprompted. Yeah, I think that's right. And this is why I say don't prematurely put tutorials in your games. Because when you're doing early playtesting, you should be playtesting with where you're there and you can explain things to people. And you can see what they struggle with, so that when you do come to design the tutorial, you can base it on your observations of like what people need to learn and what people have trouble remembering and all of that from your playtesting. I'm going to wrap it up now, folks. I didn't work out how to use the character companion because the tutorial came up after I was bored of dialogue and skipping through loads of it. So I think there's something we can do with like throwing her in the air or something, but I'm not sure how we do it. Yeah, I think this game is... There's lots of... I've been moaning about this game. There's lots of stuff in here which is good and has obviously had loads of time and care put into it. But it does feel like... I'm gonna... Do we have to fight the bear to go in the cave? It does feel like... You gotta... Now that you've learnt this set of skills, right? Now that you know that you can do all of this stuff, go away and do another project that is much more focused on understanding what the player is supposed to be enjoying and sort of learning as a skill. This feels a little bit like it's a game that's very focused on telling a story, but the story isn't interesting. The skills that we're doing are just like an amalgamation of things from different places. It's not doing a great job of answering that question of like, why would I play this instead of a similar game? And in terms of just like production workflows, give the game to more people to test before you get to this level of polish. This is just way too far along to have some of the issues that it has, I think. Oh, okay, the high jump is up and jump. So that's our normal jump, and that's our high jump, which makes her jump up higher, which I guess you can use for collecting things. I don't know. It doesn't have the feedback to indicate that a special move is happening. Basically, I press up and jump at the same time she throws me up in the air. There's not like a whoosh or anything to kind of let me know something magical has happened there.
All of this combat just feels like I'm slaying monsters to harvest their resources as well, which is... Yeah, it just feels a little bit all over the place. There's lots of individual things that could be part of a... could be part of a good game, but it's like... it doesn't know if this is supposed to be beat 'em up focused or exploration focused, or the story is maybe not strong enough for it to be a story focused game on its own. You know, the combat that we're doing feels like we're mainly doing it to harvest resources because the enemies don't really pose any threat. And that means that it just feels like we're being nasty and beating up animals in the woods, which could be fine if it was more focused on the idea that you are, you know, crafting ingredients for something, or then it would be okay to just have creatures that you just kind of RuneScape and you just go up to them and bash them and they die and they're not really a combat challenge. But I think because there's nothing in the creative direction, the narrative design of the game to tell us what type of character we are, except that we're a kid, really. It makes it hard to understand whether we're supposed to be experiencing this character as like a daring hero, because, you know, killing monsters that are very easy to kill doesn't make you feel like a daring hero. We're not like a scrappy little Link character who is trying to be a brave hero and doing their best. And we're not a slice of life horror protagonist like in Limbo, where it's like you are a kid because that fits very well with the theme of it being a horror game. It just feels very, very confused, and it may be just too far along with lots of ideas that don't quite fit together into something that's coherent and where it's very clear what a player is supposed to get out of it, you know? So, yeah, I hope you can do something with that, but I think if you want to save this game, developer, you need to work out what it's about. And you've built a load of environment and you've started to tell a story, but I think I'm lost in the woods and I need to get home doesn't fit very well with I'm collecting hearts to get more health and I'm getting a dash jump and stuff. You know, all of the games that do that, it is baked into the archetype of the character. You know, I'm leveling up my spacesuit as Samus to become more powerful. I'm a little knight or I'm a little wizard on a quest and I'm going to become more powerful. The whole Metroidvania thing of gradually becoming more powerful and unlocking these abilities and skills doesn't fit with the I'm lost in the woods thing. And I think you've got a little bit too far with the story and building all the world out before working out what type of cool this character is supposed to be. Like, what is it about this character that's supposed to be cool, and how does the player sort of learn and express that as they play the game? It feels a little bit too much like it's trying to be a story, and I think if that's the case, you could go much more in the Limbo direction and make it a game where you can't really fight stuff. You just, you know, you're a vulnerable character in a difficult situation and you're just trying to get through this, and you're not actually running around beating stuff up to get coins out of it or leveling up your hearts. It's a much simpler kind of story focused game with a variety of different perils that you mostly have to avoid. That could be a direction to take this in, but it doesn't feel like you've really got a firm bead on why the combat exists in the game or how it's supposed to feel or anything like that. And I would think a little bit about that, because you either need to put the work into making the combat feel good and making the character feel like a heroic fighting character, or really scale it back to make the best use of this being a vulnerable character. And yeah, like Hot Wells just said, you should be one of the Squirrel Bears instead. I mean, they're the best characters so far. But yeah, that's all I have to say for today. Thank you for tuning in. That was Echo of God. That was one of the games sent in to the public submission thing. If you want to submit a game, this blue panel down at the bottom where it says send your work in progress games to indiegameclinic.com, you could submit a game there, If you go onto my Patreon, if you go to patreon.com/indie game clinic, I recently did a post about how I pick games from the list. There are a bunch of different criteria that go into that. The game before that was Godless Avalon. That was that slightly quirky kind of, Chrono Trigger type top-down action RPG. Great. This was just really coherent. Everything in this game went together very well. The dialogue was funny. The dialogue made you want to read it. The dialogue was very respectful of your time and had like lots of optionality of, hey, do you want to trigger this dialogue now or later? Art was really consistent and coherent. There was just nothing in this game that I thought, oh, that needs more work. It did a very good job of proving to me as a player that I would like to play more of it. And that's what a demo should do. And that's kind of different from early playtesting. But, this was a commercial demo for something on Steam. And it was, in a way, much more narrow and focused and polished than the previous game we played, where it felt like they were calling it a playtest, but they'd actually just built way too much of the game and they hadn't refined any of the elements of it. So yeah, that was from one of our patrons. Thanks for supporting the channel. If it weren't for you guys, I wouldn't do any of the other stuff. So the people that support this channel on Patreon, yeah, there are some perks to that, and you can find them on patreon.com/indie game clinic. There's like early access to videos I do, and drafts of things from my book, and you get priority on these streams, which is what's happening at the moment. So I pick one of the patrons' games, in this case Godless Avalon, and I pair it up with something that looks similar in some way, and we stream them together. But the backlog for the publicly submitted games on the form on indiegameclinic.com is like 300 games, and the backlog for the patrons' games is much shorter. I have noticed recently people joining, getting one playtest, and then unjoining, which I will notice when you do that. It is a very helpful community. There are community members doing other helpful things for each other in there, like playtesting each other's games, doing show and tell sessions and stuff like that. Really nice to see things like that starting to happen as well. So yeah, thanks to everyone who supports the channel. I am entirely patron funded at the moment. I don't have any sponsorships going on. I've done them in the past. The only collaborative sponsorships I've ever done were the ones with Chris Sukowski and the ones with Game Maker. I only take money from brands that I'm happy to support, and most of the offers that I've had in the last 6 to 12 months have been from AI companies where I'm skeptical of the quality of what they're selling. So I am very, very dependent on Patreon funding to be able to do stuff like this. So thank you so much to everyone who supports over there. And I will be back with another stream the day after tomorrow, I think. Let me see. I cannot hold all of this in my brain. What is it next? Is that a real sentence? Chill Nature Incrementals. That's what we're doing on Thursday. So we've got Sea and Sundry, which is one of our patrons' games about being a sea otter, and we've got Pond Keeper and Drunk Woodcutter. Those are all incremental games or casual games about something nature related. So tune in again on Thursday at the same time, and we will do that. And have a good Tuesday.